All right, let's see if we can get this back
Mm.
up and running. That is terrifying when my hardware failure because I'm always certain it's going to be my hard drive, and then, oops, there goes some settlements. Don't worry, I have backups, backups on backups on backups.
Oh yes.
Let's see here.
And I've realized it's actually good to have backups not just in your house, actually on clouds or
Oh
something
yeah,
where you can actually reach it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've got it on the cloud. I got an external hard drive. I'm just like so terrified of losing files because so many years of work.
Oh yeah, that would be
Okay,
devastating.
I think we're back up. Let's see. It doesn't show live though. Another mic check for anybody who's tuned in can let me know if you can hear me.
Mm.
The software is so easy, but the technology behind it not too stable. Okay, I think I've got it all fixed. Yep, we got viewers coming up. Mic check.
So
Tinuvia? Can you talk again so we can see if they can hear you?
yes, I can. I'll get back to talking again, and
Okay.
hopefully you can hear us.
All right.
Uh,
Well, I'll keep an eye on the chat, see if they can. But let's continue off where we left off. So, what was the last thing you heard me saying? I was trying to explain the new function I just sent you, but then I don't know
yeah.
where it cut.
So the last thing I think I the one I got is it's the one with start sim settlements conquer faction data. That's the thing but I still need the to call the script faction manager as
Mm-hmm.
cast as, or do you think I don't need that because like you said I will always have the scripts. I can rely on the
Yeah, I think
players to
I
have the scripts.
yeah I think you can rely on it. I think that the some player out there will probably install it and not realize they need Conqueror, and nothing's going to work for them either, whether or not you cast as or
That
not. You know what I mean? So like you
that's
might as
true.
well just make it easier on yourself in the code and
Yeah.
skip the relay functions and just do it straight up and just have copies of all the code in your directory so that it'll actually compile.
Because it's like you say, as long as the scripts are in the folders, it doesn't matter to the papyrus whose mod it's coming from.
Right. They could be coming from a total other mod besides Conqueror even. That's why we
Yeah.
can do things like Workshop Framework where I'm overwriting the vanilla scripts is
Mm,
that the game doesn't actually care where they're coming from. It follows the same logic as everything else, whereas it's the last version of something loaded into the game, that's the one that gets used. So
makes
doesn't
sense.
care what things attach to what. So yeah, so with this basically this function then you would use then this anytime you need the faction data and you need to get access to the sub things rather than trying to access my data, you can actually
Mm.
just access this use this get faction data, and because Papyrus is coded so that you can do dot access, you can always do things like this. Like this is a total
So,
valid line of code.
so
Um,
this would actually be its own function,
right.
of course. It's not within the other. So this is my own function, and it gets the data.
Right. Yep. So that'll do it all
And
in the
then
background, and that way you can be sure. Like, and then if you could then do things like either run just that function like I just said there, or you could do something like if get faction data does not equal none,
mm,
or like you could do that somewhere, or even what might be even better is in your get faction data. The first
mm,
time that you set let me copy paste this one more time here. What we could do here as well is you could have maybe a bool that says like b my faction pack in use, because until they actually conquer a settlement with it, your faction pack's actually dormant, not doing anything.
Ah,
So maybe you could do this: my faction pack in use equals true. You would declare it as a global and default it to false. So we'd go up here and we'd go.
yes, because
Will
now I
be
get a lot of things in the papyrus logs with because it's none.
right. So then you
So,
could then all of your checks could just become, before you even start doing anything, go if my faction pack in use,
mm,
and now that's a real cheap test you can do anywhere in your
mm.
code, and then if it is, then you continue. Otherwise, you just exit out.
That's perfect. That's sort of that's another thing because I don't know enough how to get the good fail safes in papyrus and the
Yeah,
things that are
the
so
best ones are to anytime you're working with some sort of form or an object
yeah.
reference is just check and make sure that thing does not equal none. I go overboard a lot of times
Mm,
with my sanity checks, is what we call those, is make
mm,
sure that the variable actually has something, just to avoid all of the log spam that comes up if some weird circumstance comes up where it doesn't work out the way you want it to. And with this game
yeah,
engine, because of script lag and dropped frames and the fact that obviously it's going to be all event driven, so things could happen out of order, it's real
yeah.
easy for code that you think is rock solid to still end up with random nuns throughout there, and then you just spam your logs with garbage.
I think you explained that was very good in one of the mod school videos where you were talking about the things not happening in the like when even if you said like I think that was in the controller script where you were talking about if it's running you still you can't really rely on it having done the things you're expecting it to do.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate, but it's just
Mm.
it's kind of anytime you're in event based programming that's threaded, you kind of have to just start thinking like that. Is just assume that nothing is happening you can't guarantee everything's happening in the order you want it to, and that things can fail. It's just the reality, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
but that should get you your access to your data, and then all of a sudden you have, let me bring this up here. No, that's not the one I want. I want this one. Let's see. Just a second, I gotta find some files. Oops. Sorry guys, I actually hit my Fallout standby thing. I gotta get that. I have that hotkeyed and I just hit it by mistake. Okay, so I've got the faction data thing back up here. So all of this data here, I think, is what you're largely looking for, right? You want to get access to your main outpost. You have arrays of your outposts and vassals, so you can just do a length check on those to see how many they have. So I think
that's exactly it. But how now I got it. Let's see. Um, I think I'm gonna have to do this back and make sure I know what I'm doing. But I
sure. Let me
excellent to have the code down. Um, there's the how, but then when I have the faction data,
yeah.
then I need to find the when I get the main outpost.
Yeah.
I think that's stored as a 0. It's like the first.
So it's
Or
actually
that's
stored.
the
So there was a lot of code in the raid gang manager that is
yeah.
obsolete. So you got to be careful when you look at raid gang manager, because
Ah,
so you said something earlier that's very, very true, is because a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, I'm trying to do things that have never been done before in Fallout 4. I
mm,
often am just experimenting. I just throw spaghetti at the wall until something works. And then usually once I
right.
find something that works, I run with it, whether or not it's the most optimal way or not. So there's a lot of that came up with Conqueror, as I was like, that works, like, let's go with it. And then when I started thinking about the features I want to do in the future, I was like, all right, well, this format is terrible for that. So the idea of eventually I knew we wanted to get to having multiple factions be able to control different groups of settlements so that we could have like little wars going on, so we could have kind of a civilization style gameplay going on. Well, my
Yeah,
original code doesn't work for that at all, so I had to rewrite all of Conqueror code for like
I see.
patch 4.1. And the raid gang manager was unfortunately is so was so built around the original code base. In fact, most of the code was all in Raid Gang Manager. But that was designed specifically for the Jammer quest line, so it's very,
Yeah.
very looped into his stuff. So it's real touch and go if you use anything out of there.
But I was thinking that some of the now that you put for Xbox that you separated a lot of the things out. So the did you rewrite those scripts that control the checks, the rating, or is because I what I found a lot of the things I wanted to do is things that looks like you had done in Raid Gang Manager, but then they call for functions in Outpost Manager and Soldier Manager and Faction Manager. So I think it seems like those three are the ones that I should be accessing.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be accessing Outpost Manager, Soldier Manager, Faction Manager. What are the other ones? Let me look it up. I name everything Manager. So let's
Yeah.
do Conquer, Star Manager. Let's see, what are they? So the big ones, yeah, Outpost Manager is a big one. Resource Manager, I don't know if there's anything useful in there. Soldier Manager, there's a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I think the three big ones are going to be Soldier, Outpost, and Faction. And then there's some other ones that I've started putting into place that I'm experimenting with, like Location Control Manager, for example. So there's a couple of quests in the Jammer quest line where you actually, help somebody take over sections of the map that aren't settlements. And it ends up replacing all of the enemies there with that faction's things. And it's something that's like, this is one of those experimental things where it's kind of wonky right now. And it's not systemized yet, but that eventually I want to systemize that, and that's where I want to get everything. But the stuff that's pointing to Outpost Manager, Soldier Manager, and Faction Manager, that stuff's all been fully systemized, so you can do that stuff through those. One of the things that's only available through Raid Gang Manager at the moment that I would like to systemize as well is the slave system. Because I know a lot of people want to see that broadened and made a little more dynamic, and hopefully not just people who are coming from Lover's Lab. I'm hoping that people want to legitimately experiment with the interesting.
We want to use it in the spreading atoms glow. We want to have them being converted. And
Yeah, there you go.
we were thinking of doing it like if you have a charisma check, or we also give the player some perks if you fulfill some challenges.
Sure.
So we could do those things. So it doesn't have to be slaves. They're just
right.
sort of entranced.
So there is some code. So I did create something for Piper's leader trait. Let me see if I can figure out where I put that code. But we had an idea of a system called Conscription, and I think that would work perfectly for what you want. So the idea with Conscription is that in the long term we want to make this a broader mechanic, not just a Piper thing. But we want to make it so that if you are keeping morale up at your vassals, that eventually, and morale and happiness up at them, that it would eventually start triggering some of the locals to like volunteer to join up your faction, as if it'd be like, oh, you guys aren't just brutal dictators, you're actually leading in a way we appreciate, so some of them are going to join your ranks. And that seems like it would be a logical thing to add in. And
that would be perfect.
Yeah, it sounds perfect for Children of Adam. Like, you just convert people over to your religion. So let me see if I can figure out where I put that code. I'm guessing it's under Soldier Manager, but it could there's also a chance. Let me see if maybe I called it Conscription. Let's see here. I definitely have a thing called Conscript name. So yeah, actually I have a function you could call. I think it should work too. So there's a function in Soldier Manager called Conscript, and you just send it any actor. You send it your faction control form and the settlement that they're at, and I think that the settlement it can pull dynamically. Let's see here what happens if and if the settlement is optional, if you don't send them a settlement reference, then it just pulls the main outpost from your faction data. So yeah, we have a function already that can convert any NPC into a soldier. Now it does work better if they're a workshop NPC script type, but I've been trying to. So I figured out recently that workshop NPC script, that thing. So any of you who watches my Bethesda Mod School, I just did a tutorial the other day on converting any NPC into a settler. Ironically, that information will become obsolete eventually because workshop framework. So I've dug into all of the code behind the workshop system by Bethesda, and that workshop NPC script, they didn't want to leave that in there. There's a lot of references of like, this is temporary until we can remove this script. because
Mm.
adding that script limits who can be recruited. Then all of a sudden they have to have that script in advance, and it also adds overhead to the game engine. Well, all of the tools needed to make somebody a settler are built into the game. They're all done on keywords and linked references. So the
Mm.
Workshop NPC script is only necessary because Bethesda hard coded it into their scripts. But because I rewrote the scripts, I can remove that requirement. And so that in a future update to Workshop Framework, that'll be completely unnecessary, and then every NPC in the game will suddenly be eligible to be a settler.
That
Which
would
would
be
be really
great.
cool. Yeah.
But
But in the meantime, it's better
mm.
if you only could script NPCs that have Workshop NPC scripts. So
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of because I think that this what another thing that when you're playing as a liberator, I'm still the thing is that I haven't played Conqueror or as a liberator enough because I'm too busy
right, you have
getting
the
the
Modder's
things up.
curse.
Yeah, the mother's curse. So I because I think there's I sort of expected it to be like when you had settlements being built up through the city plans, that they would be filled with my little atomites, because I put them up as civilians. But
Oh,
I
okay.
think now when you attack settlements, but I think that might be because the only settlements I've attacked have been where people have lived already, like Oberland and. But actually, I tried Sanctuary too, and they're regular settlers. They look like regular settlers, but they're called
Right.
civilians.
So what the civilian record does on your faction control data
Yeah.
is so the normal settlement rules are still running in the background, even in outposts and vassals. So it's not just that they get converted fully. The normal rules still apply. So under a normal settlement circumstance, if there's a recruitment beacon there and your
Mm.
happiness is reasonable and you aren't at max for your charisma, or if you're
Mm.
using some of the settings in some settlements workshop framework to like override charisma requirements or whatever, all that combination of options, if it's such that it's okay for a settler to be recruited on the normal daily cycle, then when it goes to recruit a settler, it'll instead recruit your civilian form if you have control of that settlement with your faction.
Ah, I see. But then that would even be better because then you don't have it. It's not filled with Trinavatum, but it will be a few living in the settlement.
Correct. Yeah, they'll over time,
That,
but that only it'll be rare
yeah.
unless the person isn't actively recruiting soldiers. Because if they're recruiting
Oh, yeah.
soldiers, likely the place will get overflowed. Because another thing that Conqueror does that's probably bad for Xbox players is it kind of ignores the normal limitations of number of settlers. Like it ignores the whole charisma thing, because the whole idea was this is all about large scale military management. So it's not.
Yeah.
So having like these arbitrary limitation tied to charisma just feels terrible.
Mm.
So it
Mm.
just bypasses that and ignores it. So it's very likely that very quickly most of your outposts will have more people than your charisma can handle anyway. So then that
Mm.
civilian form isn't really going to kick in very often. I do
But then,
have
mm.
plans in the short term, so probably before the end of the year, to introduce a new system where during the startup, so during the very start of the game, when you do that, what I call the scenario generator, where you're laying out which settlements are going to have city plans and setting up randomization, there's going to be a new section of that where you can choose which faction starts out in control of a particular settlement, and so that way people could set it up so that there's already a campaign generated where the children of Adam have dominated the whole world and they've got to take them
Yeah.
out or something like that. Like people will be able to create whatever dream scenarios they want for taking on a faction or having multiple factions involved, and it'll be fully randomizable and or manually configurable the same way you can currently set up which settlements have which city plans. You'll be able to set up which settlements have which factions in control, and in that case then the
Yeah.
civilian form would get used to populate the entire settlement.
I see how you're thinking, yeah, and that makes sense too. Because I think that how I understood it before I started playing them, I thought the vassals would be more like customized, because that's the thing with the totems and the faction decorations and the different building plans and things. It's more. I really like the idea of having it the vassals and the outposts being different and with different plots, but.
Yeah.
I think I had sort of thought that the vassals would be more customized theme wise already now, but it makes sense. That will be coming next
Yeah, you'll be able to do
phase.
something like that in the future. Right now, I think the faction decorations only get applied to the outposts, not to the vassals. I think the
Yeah.
vassals are pretty hands off. It's more like when you create a vassal, you're just setting up guards and you're just putting them under your thumb. as
Yeah.
opposed to the outposts where you're fully taking over, committing, and that's when the skins will change on the buildings, the faction decorations get applied, the soundtrack can change. Like all of that stuff applies to the outposts to fully
Mm.
transform them. And then with the vassals, it's meant to be, like that's our farm. Like we're just the way they did it with Nuka World with the raiding. Is the idea is the vassal is you're basically just intimidating them to get resources.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. But because I think that it takes a while, and I think you actually gave that advice in one of the I think was it one of the news, one of your videos in a way, when you said that even if you weren't planning to play with Jammer's gang, it would be good to have one save going, so you sort of understood the basics seen from the Conqueror aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been meaning to do the same thing for Liberators, is go pick up one of the Liberator faction packs and play it
Yeah.
for a while, just so that I can fully wrap my head around it, because it's totally different when you're playing and testing versus when you're playing for your own enjoyment.
Oh yeah, and there are just a few things that I think I'm trying to note them down when as I stumbled on them, and some I can change myself. Like when I made our version of the War Planet desk, I changed the raid and said redemption instead, because I can change
Yeah, you
the
can change the name.
activation count.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so we're trying to do those things, but and there's sort of things popping up. I think it was when you come to a vassal, they will still think they say even if you liberated them, they'll tell you that you should go back to Nuka World and set the pressure on the settlements there.
Yeah,
But I
there's
think when
a. Does that still happen with the Nuka World patch? That was something I tried to fix.
no, I don't think we didn't get we'll get the Nuka World patch, and I think that would help with because I think you also put I think in the patch notes that there if one wanted one could do a separate mod that would do the vanilla edits,
Oh
and
yeah,
I was
yeah. For
thinking about
the to
maybe doing
eliminate
something
the
like that.
Minutemen lines, there's some
Good,
lines the
that's
settlers
the
have
one.
where they like say, "Oh, thank God for the Minutemen," if you're a
Yes.
liberator, so that which wouldn't feel right all the time. So yeah, there's some steps in the patch notes for roughly what you'd have to do for that. But the Nuka World patch
Mm.
should stop them from calling you a raider if you're a liberator faction.
I think you're right. Actually, I think I might have missed downloading that, so I'll get that one and I'll make sure and check that it suppresses those lines. But getting back to the coding, I think
Yeah,
with this, like you said now, I think I can probably if I use the function the way you've done, because I've also seen in the Raid Gang Manager when you do the updates for different mod versions,
yeah.
there were a few different ways to check for the main outpost
Yeah, and
to
that's
update that.
again, that's probably like various. I've rewritten the majority of the Conqueror code 3 times this year,
Yeah, oh,
because
that's
it's just
a lot of
we
work.
came up with some fundamental difference in like thinking about how it's going to work, or it's like, oh Jesus, I didn't think about that, but you're right, we have to do this. So then everything gets rewritten. I'm finally at a point now where I think one more rewrite
Mm,
to match all, because I've been rewriting all of Sim Settlements for a long time, to get all
yeah.
that code up to standards, which is what I'm waiting for before I open source it, is to make sure that I fix all the dumb mistakes I've made throughout the last couple of years of development and make the code
Mm,
something worthy of people learning from.
mm.
And so when that happens, I'll have to rewrite Conqueror one more time to make sure it works with those code changes, and then I'll be done rewriting. I'll have support for everything. But yeah, that so again, Raid Gang Manager, real risky. Learn from that. Um,
And that's the one I thought because I thought it was excellent. It's all the things I want to do. It's all in there.
yeah.
So it was really. But if I wanted to, so I'll use the function you had, the
Okay.
one you sent me, and I'll check. And then I get the faction data store. But and because then if I had that data store, because in there I think I have the. It says what faction I'm in and what the main outpost and how many outposts and how many vessels. All that is in there, isn't it?
Yeah, it even has things like how many special units or virtual units are there. It has your
Mm.
warrior, guard, patrol counts, everything.
So then, because just to make sure that I get it, once I have the faction data in there, I call it like in an array that I can call it like now I want this element or this the first element or the second, or am I not really getting it?
It depends. Well, it's so once you have faction data, you just do dot variable names. So right now I'm
Okay.
looking at the faction data. So if you want
Yeah.
main outpost, you would just do um, you would be, so if we use the function that I sent you, it would be get, what did I call it? Get faction data, and then you could either it would just be get faction data dot main outpost or get faction data dot outposts. And then you can access that data as if it were a variable right in your own code.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm gonna have to see how if I can get it to work and compile. So maybe I'll hook you up on Discord again if it doesn't work. But I'm sure
Yeah, no
I think
problem.
this sounds like the best way. Because I was also looking at I thought like the first one, like you said, like actually changing Conqueror so it would be an ESM, but then I actually had some difficulties getting it to work with Xedit because
Okay.
I can change it into an ESM, but then I couldn't change it back because it changed something in the 4.0 versions because they redid a lot of the Xedit scripts.
Oh, interesting. So basically what
And
you would do here, I'll bring some other people can see it, how you would
mm,
convert this. So this is not something I have a lot of familiarity with. So this might be doing something incorrect. So anybody who knows better,
but
let
I
me
think the
know.
thing
But
is that I have to keep changing it back because the creation kit wants it
right, that's the one
to
issue is
have
that
the
creation kit will, I think, will remove the master. It'll think it's invalid.
yeah. So and then everything got renumbered. So the whole plugin got screwed
Oh
up.
yeah, that's probably gonna be the problem. I think it's kind of this is one of those tricks you can do if you're just working in Xedit, but I think if you're bouncing back and forth,
Yeah,
it's a big
I
problem.
think for patches it's perfect. But and then
Yeah,
the other thing I thought, okay, I'll keep it as an ESM all the time until
yeah.
I publish. But then you keep doing these updates every third week, so I'd have to,
Yeah, it's a headache.
But
That's
that's
yeah, I
why I
know. That's
sent
why
this
I always
through.
feel bad for anybody who does faction or add-on packs, just because we're on such an aggressive update schedule that it's like I'm setting pretty tough role to follow to try and keep
Yeah,
up
but
with us.
you do set pretty high standards. But I think most people do understand that you're a big team of people because it's kind of hard for us to sort of fill it with all the things we want and what people are sort of they're not expecting it, but they're wishing it would have all those things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think people would love every time I see when I go look at the comments on the faction packs, it's all the same thing of everybody like, "Oh, thank God you made this. Are you going to add this?" And it's like, guys, that's a
yes,
lot to ask. My favorite one
yeah,
is always, "Are you going to do a full quest line like Conqueror?" It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't think you guys understand what's involved in that. There's a lot of people
And
involved in
the
that.
thing is that when you start going, because I thought, well, I'm not even very good at narration. Myra is much better. He can actually be creative and come up with things. I can more sort of set it into a logic kind of way. So
Okay.
for me, it was like I can see that we can have like 3 or 4 quest lines going
Yeah.
that can give the player something fun to do. And one is actually the main conqueror, just getting settlements and then unlocking special units and buildable items. So we have a
Yeah.
few lined up already. And
Mm.
then we have another one that I'm thinking where you're doing that's a sort of a side quest
Yeah.
where you can get commanders, special leaders, and
Yeah,
you get
those are going
yeah
to be sweet.
building
I
plans
loved
and
that I saw that on your list of questions. It's like, "Oh, that's exactly the type of thing I was hoping people would do." Was
yeah.
add more custom voiced NPCs for their characters.
And then yeah, because it's really fun also because I think players help with filling. I mean, they don't have to be so fleshed out because people can. They don't have to be fully companions. It
Right.
makes the whole faction pack have more soul if you have people to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think they need it. Like if you look at the characters we added, like I saw you posted in your notes to me, reference to a line in the script about Sarah. We added a few
Yeah,
characters into Conqueror like 2 patches ago, and I think there's 3 or 4 of them, and they don't have a ton of lines, but they have a nice little introduction speech, and then they have some repeat, like a random set of lines they'll say if you walk up to them and talk to them, and
yeah.
they're just a nice little addition. They like just feels more. It feels more like some of these characters matter as opposed to the generic settler who just keep telling you about their fingernails being dirty.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, the writers are really good. I mean, just those few lines that they have, they make them really unique personalities. All 4 are very different.
Yeah,
So mad props to them. They're doing
I
and
agree. Mad props to the writers and the voice actors on the team because they
yeah.
are doing awesome work.
But you're kind of ruthless with them too, because if I get it correctly, if they don't, I mean, with these leaders, because if you don't recruit them, do you disable them on load? Unload?
No, if you don't recruit them, we send them to Drumlin Diner and they just hang out there, and then
Ah,
you
good.
can go have another
Yeah,
opportunity to recruit them. That was what I
Yeah,
opted to do.
okay. Because yeah, they do. Because I saw that in the aliases they have that package. All right. Because I thought you would just snapping them out of the world, and they wouldn't be anymore.
Yeah,
That would be
I
sad.
wasn't sure how to handle those because, um, we want to give the player the option to be like, no, I don't like you, because like one of the
Yeah.
characters, Jason, is kind of a crazy, and I
Yeah.
remember Phil T Casual from the forums was testing it. And he's like, "Oh, if I wasn't testing, this guy would have a bullet in his face right now." And I was like, "That well, that's what you're going for. We wanted these extreme personalities, love them or hate them, and you can choose what you want to do with them. Like, there's no penalty for
Yeah.
killing them or declining them. It's just a matter of, do you like that person and you want to use them or not?"
But I mean, that's good. You want to leave the player the choice, and that you might
Yeah.
actually make a difference. But I thought we'd get ours to, if you don't recruit them, they'd be unique visitors. So you'd have them pop out at
Oh,
seven.
that's a good idea. Yeah, you could
But
definitely do
because
that. That would be
I think you'd only need to inject it into the form list, right?
right. So we added a system for unique visitors. So what I would probably do is just put them into that system,
Yeah.
and then if the player does their conversation. So let's jump over to something. We've just been talking
Yeah.
about theory. Let's jump into some actual useful code here. So the thing you had asked about was, how do you recruit unique NPCs? And I had a line of code, and I'm going to
Yes.
scroll back up through our chat and just copy
I have.
paste it here.
I have that. I sent that. That's one of the scripts I sent you, and that's even more. That's mostly just my comments because the things I
Yeah.
can't do. But and I mean your the tutorial is really good because that helps to do the special units.
Right. Right.
And I looked at that. I think you need to. I think it's wrong because it's pointing to option manager, the outpost manager, in the tutorial, and all the
It
functions
could
are in
be that some
soldier
of my
manager.
tutorials need to be updated, because one of the problems is when I've done these 2 rewrites now,
Yeah.
and I have not gone back and done rewrites of the
No.
toolkit. So what I've
True.
been doing is just putting them in notes in the new in this version. So any of you who follows along with my toolkits who's watching, definitely if you're late to the game in it, it's a good idea to go read through new in this version, because I don't always get around to
Mm.
updating the full tutorials, but I always put the changes in the new in this version document.
Ah, that's excellent. That true. That's the place to go look for it, like you said. Because I mean, it's not feasible to be updating the whole toolkits every time. That would be
Right, it's
then you
hard
wouldn't
enough to
do
keep the
anything. But
mod
yeah,
updated every 2 or 3 weeks, much less also then
yeah,
keeping all of the auxiliary content updated as well. I would love to. I mean, if this were like if we had a business here, I would make that happen. But
yeah.
this is just a gigantic hobby.
So
So I've got the script up on my screen right now, so people can see
yeah.
what you were asking about. So it's the function is if and then there's an exclamation point, and so that's not. So if not,
Mhm.
soldier manager dot add actor to outpost player choice. And then it's in this version of the code, it's Sarah.getActorRef. That Sarah, in this case, in this full script, is a reference alias pointing to a
Yeah.
unique actor. And then I don't remember what the false true mean. Let me go look this up just because so I can
I
talk
think
fully about it. So I think it's in Outposts,
yeah.
or is it in Soldier Manager? Soldier Manager. Let's bring up
Yeah, because I
Soldier
couldn't
Manager.
understand what you were doing there. It's
So basically, what I'm doing here is, let me bring up this function. So those respect charisma limit and then auto add to settlement. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm sending false to charisma limit, which means that what add actor to outpost player choice does is pops up that
mm,
menu that you're
yeah.
used to getting when you find a random settler to recruit. Like if you go to Sheffield, you get that pop up that says, where do you want to send them? So first you send them the actor. Then the next true or false is, should it only show outposts that have room in them? If you send
Mm,
true, that's what it will do. If you send false, it'll show all your outposts. And then the last parameter is auto add to the settlement. And so what that does is, if that's true, which is the default, then as soon as the player selects one, you're
mm,
done. The code doesn't need to finish anymore. It'll just automatically put them in that outpost, and then their AI will update and they'll start walking toward it. If you send it false, what instead
mm.
will happen is that add actor to outpost player choice will instead return the location they chose. So then you can
Yeah.
react to that in some way. So maybe it's a matter of you want to have a secondary screen in there, or maybe you want to have them say something based on the settlement that was chosen before you send them.
Ah,
Whatever you wanted to do, it just gives you an opportunity to react so you can handle it manually. So that is
yes.
a pattern that I love because it lets you it basically provides kind of a hook where you can just do things your own way. So if so there are two ways well there are a million, there's infinite ways. There are two ways that I like to approach programming things like this to open them up so people can do what they want. One of the ways is to add parameters that control all the options. And this is what I did for Workshop Framework. If you ever dig into the Workshop Framework code for assaults, there are hundreds of options you can set up. And like each one is, it's broken into like 6 or 7 different functions where it's, and I can't remember the names of them offhand, but they're basically like set up auto complete conditions. And then there's just a series of variables you can choose. That's one way to do it. And that way can be very intimidating to look at because you just have like all these parameters that you may not understand. But it does give a lot of flexibility without the person needing to know how to code. The other way to do it is to just do the bare minimum with each block of code. So instead of trying to do this big complicated thing with all these options, instead just do a little tiny thing, return some information back to the code, and then let the coder decide how to handle it. And that's what I did with this actor to outpost player choice. So I guess this is kind of a hybrid of the two. You have, in one sense, you have the true false you can send to have it auto add. And then it also returns back data you could act on so that you could handle adding them yourself. So what this not is saying here in this line in the if statement, it will, if the player doesn't choose something, it's going to return none. And so if not this, that would be the equivalent of none, then that will result true. And then this next part of the if statement will fire off. So basically, if the player declines to choose a settlement, it forces them to the main outpost. That's what's happening here.
So because I thought, since the add actor to player, since that thing is in an if statement, I mean it's not actually executed, is it? It's just checking if that one is just sending the location back.
Well,
so you need the second one without the player choice. That's the one that actually does the recruiting.
No, actually, in this case, that's not, because I sent true as the third parameter there. I'm saying here, add actor to outpost player choice. The first is Sarah. I sent her reference. Then the next is respect the charisma limit. We're saying false because we want all of our outposts to show up. And then auto add to settlement is true, which means that if the player chooses something, they are going to get auto added. But if they failed to choose something, then this is going to fail. So the if statement will result in true, because this is a confusing logic concept in programming. So anybody who's so this is like what this line is saying is only run what's inside the if statement if the player fails to choose an outpost. So if they just hit cancel. Basically what I was trying to avoid there is having them say in dialogue, let me tell you where to go, or you can join up. They accidentally hit cancel, or they're like, what, I don't want to send her to one of those, and then they lose her forever. It's like I was just trying to avoid that scenario, so we just force her to go to the main outpost if they fail to choose someone.
I could see that what was happening, but I couldn't understand how you made it happen, because I thought I thought the if statement only returned the location.
Yeah.
So now I get it.
Another way to write, so like I'm going to do this just for the sake of everybody seeing this. I don't even know if you all are watching my stream to see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to rewrite this code in a way that's a little cleaner. So we could do location player chosen location equals soldier manager dot add actor or whatever. So we take that there. Then we change our if statement to if player chosen location equals none, and I'll put a comment there, means player canceled select screen. So this code I have right now on screen, this is the exact same thing as what the other code was doing, but in a more readable format. But this is exactly what that other code was doing. I just did it all in one line. So that's the difference. It's just a matter of, and I can, if you can't see my screen, I'll paste it into Discord chat for you. So this is the exact same code, but it's just written in a different way.
The Twitch is a little lagging behind.
Oh, that's right. I posted it into your Discord so you can see it as well there. Yeah. But that's the same code. And that's one of those things where I waffle between doing it in, like, in all my Bethesda Mod School stuff. I try to always write like this, like everything to be super clean and legible. And then in my own code, or for the Sim Settlements and Conqueror stuff, I tend to just be like, all right, I want as few lines as possible because I know that this script is going to end up being 10,000 lines at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you still, I mean, you need it to do what it's supposed to do. And in this, it's not really, I can see that. And there's not that many, most people that will use these functions will understand what they're doing anyway. So
Right, right.
I think it's a correct,
Approach.
yeah, approach.
Maybe
Exactly.
not long term though, because ultimately, we're kind of building a framework here for a whole new game is what we've been doing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
having folks like you involved in this is something I definitely want to encourage. So anything I can do to make it easier. That's actually why I started. I came up with this idea to do this little series and invited you two on. Is there's so
Yeah.
many people who are contributing to the project that probably have no idea what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, and would
Mm.
probably be nice to have a chat and try and clarify some things and help you all create better content.
Yeah, because it's excellent, and I try to really, it's I think the whole series of content that you release from the let's plays and all down to the news and everything helps a lot in sort of seeing your vision from where you're going. Because there's a lot of times that we can think like, oh, we want to do this, and then you see like, they're going that way, and how are we going to do that? How are we going to do now? So it's really nice to be part of an ever evolving community like this.
Oh yeah, and
It,
your work, the work that you all have done, has inspired certain directions. Like there's a lot of the way I envisioned the mod originally versus where we're at now is quite a bit different, and where we're going is even still more different than what I originally envisioned. Because in general, I'm just trying to keep to the idea of I want to have an immersive world building simulation going on that
mm,
fits within the Fallout 4 gameplay loop. Like I don't want to become so overbearing that we're all stuck in the weeds like managing settlements. Like it needs to
yeah.
feel like a natural part of while you're playing Fallout 4 and while you're being an explorer and doing your
Mm,
thing. So it's constantly evolving things. And like for example, your buildings that you all have put in are so much better than anything I designed for the VIPs that my VIPs became a joke where it was like, oh, they don't stand out in any way. So it's like, all right, let's move away from that system. Let's move toward more, let's give the power to the add-on pack creators to just do whatever they want. And so like there's definitely watching the community build content inspires some of the direction I go with the framework.
but it's still, I think it's also going back to um, because I'm actually I've been trying to build skins for the original Sim Settlements buildings.
Oh,
S-
awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
and it's the way you built them are perfect because you have like a frame where you can put things, and
Yeah.
it's really easy to change them. So I think that has its own merits. Because the only thing is that we tried to. I remember we have one VIP story,
Okay.
and I think that was really hard to do because I find it very hard to make something that's very generic
Yeah.
and generic in a way that it's reusable. And I think that's the different mindsets. It's more of an artistic way, but that makes it like if you see some of our plots several
Yeah.
times, you know it's the same thing. So
Right.
that's a disadvantage with it as well.
That's true. Yeah,
Let
my
me
my
discussion.
generic style works much better for skinning. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead.
I just commented that this has been we've been going over this over and over and over again. Which direction are we going to take the plots? Are we going to make them less so they don't stand out so much, or are we going to go with oh, we have an idea and it's going to be outlandish? And
So the way
so
I've
in
been looking
the
at it is anytime I need something that feels really unique in my settlement, I just treat the Wasteland Venturers as my pool of VIPs. That's where I pull from.
that's that's really sweet. Then we came to the whole problem where we sort of because we were really looking out for the polygons and trying to make it that way. We didn't know
Yeah.
about the draw thing, and then we realized some of our if you have
oh yeah,
a
big
few of our
mistake there.
plots, you can have three, and then you fill
Oh,
the Jamaica Plains limit.
so the
Right.
first couple of plots they were like, oh, we're going to go with the minimum amount of polygons. I came from a 3D. Um, I studied 3D in school, but
Sure.
by then I didn't really realize the amount of draws, the drawback of having the amount of draws. I thought always look for the polygon, Susan, and we did.
Right.
So we tossed out everything. You can't have a sofa. That's an insane amount of polygons. And then we have but I do want to have another poster. It's just 2 polygons.
Right.
Oh, here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can actually see that evolve as we understand more. There are less posters.
Yeah,
And the thing is,
there's actually functionality in the so there's a ton of console commands that are disabled in the live version, but somebody data mined them, and there's a list of them online. But there's one for counting like the number of textures in the area, so that are in the loaded cells, and you can see that was a big concern of Bethesda's, and this is why. So everybody watching, if you're ever wondering why does Fallout 4 crash all the time, and in particular, why is it I can't play with city plans on Xbox? It's usually because the Fallout 4's game engine does not have a nice way to degrade when it gets too many textures in memory. So most games, what they would do is just dump some textures and just resort to like a default or lower res texture. Fallout 4 just crashes instead. It's just like, oh, you went over our memory limits, crash. So just really poorly designed part of the game engine.
But it makes sense to take it. I mean, we need to sort of take that into consideration too. But we sort of leave it in the hands of the players also, because if you build several of our plots, and we play very differently. I mean, usually when we play, we only have up to 10, 15 settlers, because I like to remember their names or who they are. So we never have like 40, 50 settlers. We don't have those huge settlements.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
well, and you can't. I mean, that's kind of one of the balance things we've been trying to do around some settlements in general is try and look at it realistically. And it's like, all right, on most systems, more than 15 settlers is a problem. So like then we have to like think about all the numbers from that perspective, work on our city plans from that perspective. And then if you do everything from that, then you can kind of go a little more nuts with the plots, because then you know that, okay, they're probably only going to have, 25 to 30 plots, and that's a little more manageable.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, the players, the ones who come back to sim settlements and do it, they learn the limits of their own systems, so they know what they can handle and not. So I guess it's sort of it solves itself. So.
Yeah, I think the long-term players figure it out. I think it's unfortunate that it's a really bad experience for new people who maybe have heard about it and they're trying to get in on it. And like, I mean, this is one of the things why I'm so pro mod pack, even though I know it's, it has implications to be a detriment to the creative community. Because like anytime you start making things easily accessible to the masses, you suddenly then create kind of superstars. It's kind of the same, and then like they get all the credit, and then so the smaller creators are less encouraged to do it. It's the same thing you see when people jump into like Twitch or YouTube with the hope of like, I'm gonna become the next PewDiePie or God, I can't think of any of the Twitch people, Ninja or whatever, and then they can't get there. And it's like that's the same situation that I think will happen with mod packs, is like you get these super mod packs that everybody knows about, and then the individual creators are going to be discouraged that they don't get to that level. But the positive side of it is that you'll get users who can come in and get up and running real quick and play with a good load order that's not going to crash on them, that eliminates all the variables outside of that. Because when we're troubleshooting and trying to help people who come to us with like, hey, try to use some settlements and it just crashes all the time. Well, there's so many damn variables in there. It's like, well, first of all, we don't, is it a limitation of your system? Is it, you just don't have enough memory? Is it that all of your other mods are conflicting? Do you have, 2 versions of a mod installed? Like there's so many problems, and that eliminates a lot of the variables with the mod packs. So we can try and get to a point where then players can get to that point of understanding that they're hitting system limitations. Right now, half the time when people put in the posts about that, I'm like, first of all, we got to first even figure out if this is a system limitation. It could just be your mod order sucks, your load order sucks.
Yeah. And I mean, for some players, I think when you modded and played Bethesda game for a long time, you sort of forget what it was like in the beginning when you didn't know that much. So I think mod packs would really, really help a lot of people. And like you say, I mean, they can. There's a lot of the guides out there where people have been testing for long. I think Bitray Beck or whatever.
His list is really thoroughly tested out.
Yeah. So I mean, I think those ones, it's worth going ahead, and I hope that it will gain more respect and likes.
Yeah, I mean, we got to figure out. There's got to be some assurances for mod authors that they're not going to get lost in the shuffle, and I think that's why Dark One is going so slowly on this. Is just like if we get a max S, like Creative Clutter is the big one that everybody knows about, that left Nexus out over this, is that like if a mass exodus like that occurred, that would destroy the whole mod pack thing outright. So it's kind of you got to find a balance there, and I'm sure they'll figure out something, because at the same time, I also think that if we don't move forward with mod packs, people are going to move on to another game that does implement them. And I think that with Bethesda wavering and cracking on quality lately, with a lot of their public relations fails and in gameplay decisions or community decisions around 76, there's an opening right now for some other RPG maker to start going big on mod support and start breaking up the community in that way. So I don't know.
There would be a lot of things lost, because I mean, a lot of people have been playing, have been modding Bethesda games for so long that it's, like you say, it's a whole source of knowledge that would be lost if it's moved into another direction for other publishers. And I think it would be
it would be a shame.
Mod packs would be helpful in that way, actually.
And I'm sure other games have the same problem of it being easy to like set up a configuration where your game is broken. It's just that the number of mods for Bethesda games are so high that it's way easier to create bad situations in your own playthroughs.
Much riskier in that way.
Yeah.
If I can just get back to the
sorry, I didn't mean to derail us on this topic. It was just tangentially related.
This is also interesting, because hearing about how you're thinking and where you're going helps us to follow along in a way that helps the mod sort of be a cohesive experience for the players, and that's really important to us. So I think all that you can say, it's helpful for us as well. That's good. But with the I think that with the script, the thing that you gave me, and especially with the thing that I can use your scripts and your functions straight and not just go the cast as, I think I can manage to get our commander recruited. And the thing is just that I don't really, because I was looking at some of the things that you do with your commanders, and I'm not really 100% certain of what makes a commander different than a special unit. I mean, obviously aside from the leader and commander cards, because you give them a keyword where they don't follow along on raids, right?
Right. So the custom command. So that, and actually, there's a bug with custom commanders right now. Right now, they're considered civilians, and what ends up happening then is during an assault. And I just noticed this the other day. I don't know how it never came up in testing, but like Jammer and Ophelia will bolt out of the settlement during an attack because they're considered civilians, so they're set to flee when you're under assault. Which was a mistake. But I started building in something to support this, and I just haven't fleshed it out yet, and what I call leadership. And those are going to be basically a special role that get assigned to those, that they'll stick around and they'll help defend, but they won't be able to go on raids. And that's ultimately how we'll solve this problem. For now, if you just don't, I would just set them up the same way you see people like Jammer and Ophelia are set up as. So put on the same types of factions and things like that, and you should be fine there.
Because they also have I looked at Ophelia, and she has, no, I think it was the Sarah and the Jason and those, because they have a very low aggressive. I think they're unaggressive.
Oh, are they? That might have been a mistake. Sometimes when we're dealing with all of the different data that's being put together by the rest of the team, sometimes things get lost in the shuffle, and I don't, and that's how we end up with bugs. So
I may be wrong though. Maybe I should better check that, because I think at least I had the trouble with our. I have some problem with. I've set our faction pack is the Children of Atom.
Okay.
And when I have a bunch of recruits in a settlement and I spawn regular Children of Atom, they will fight. And I had the problem with our commander as well. Before I recruited her, he started fighting.
There's a problem with a lot of the default NPCs when you spawn them in. The problem is their aggression by default is set to very aggressive, which means they'll attack anybody who's not directly allied to them. And right now I'm trying to find, here it is. Okay, so I'm bringing up Conquer right now, so I can just bring up one of these NPCs and just show you specifically. But basically for those vanilla, so what I've had to do to handle spawning those in a way that they don't attack is I end up stripping all of their factions down and applying a spell to them that reduces their aggression and confidence, but it's really flaky on whether it works. That's how the prisoner system works in the prisons, is that it spawns generic NPC of that faction type, and then it just strips down all of their data so that and tries to force them to be unaggressive, but it doesn't work all the time because sometimes, depending on the order, this is one of those things where depending on the order the game decides to fire off things, it cannot work out. So it'll be like, let's see, say I apply a spell to reduce their aggression, but before that the AI has processed and starts a combat. Well, just because I reduce their aggression doesn't stop them from suddenly being in combat. So like
keep it. Okay, so you think that it's part of the spawning, it's sort of creating a problem.
So at the start, so what, like the best, like the way I do it with Workshop Frameworks, because it handles all of the assaults and the attacks, is I end up spawning them off camera somewhere. So like at some like temporary cell, do all of the spell application and changing their factions around, do it there, and then move them into position somewhere. So that way, before they're even in the in the world with everybody else, where they could start a fight, they have been configured correctly. So the reason the prisoners and the slaves get weird with Conqueror is that they already exist in your settlement. So I'm trying to, behind the camera, quickly set all that stuff up before they have a chance to trigger combat, and it's not always fast enough.
I wonder, because I think that I actually probably jumped to conclusions, because when I put our commander in Red Rocket, and that was my main outpost, and then they started fighting. So then next time when I put her where she's meant to be, I had toned down her aggression, because it seemed like, I think Sarah had a low aggression. I don't remember, but anyway, and then it worked, so I could recruit her.
Yeah.
But
I'm checking Sarah right now to see what her aggression's set up, but I can see it looks like, so one of the things you're going to have to do with with using some of the intermod compatibility stuff. Let me delete this out. You're going to have to do get form from file to grab this this keyword. So the KG Conc prevent auto add to assaults.
Yes.
You're going to have to add that dynamically to your NPC. So there's a couple of ways you could do that. The way I think the smartest way I think to do it would be, I probably actually have a script for this in Sim Settlements. Let me look this up, because I think I wrote a script like this to do the Mega Pack Year 1 for the donut thing. Let me look that up. So let me see. Let's see. Sim Settlements keyword. No, let's see. Add. Okay, yeah. So in KG Helpers.
Yes.
Open this one up. Yes, perfect. Okay, so here's a script. I'm gonna just send you the whole content of the script. You could add, since you have some settlements as a master, you'll have access to this script. But there's a script called add keywords, and you could set this up and it uses external forms, so you can configure the hex ID and you convert it to an integer and the plugin name. So then you could get access to this, and it would automatically apply them as soon as that NPC loads. So then you could put a copy of the script right on your NPC, and then have it dynamically add this keyword KG Conc prevent auto add to assaults.
Oh, that's just fantastic. You're sort of You're spoiling us. Yes. That's perfect. Yeah. Good. Then we'll set, and I think we actually have. She's called Rockatansky. So we're doing another one of the movie references to Mad Max.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I actually think, because the only thing I mean.
Oh yeah, I see what you're talking about. I have Sarah set up as unaggressive. I'll have to fix that. And it's supposed to be aggressive is the ideal default for most NPCs, because that makes them so they'll actually attack people who are their enemies, but they won't just start fighting neutrals, which is very aggressive. Makes people fight neutrals, which is not ideal. That's the typical enemy.
Because
so yeah, it looks like I gotta add that to my bug list.
Since she's a raider, I thought you didn't want them to start fight before you had recruited her.
But even so the aggressive faction, aggressive, doesn't mean they'll only pick a fight if their faction alignment is such that you are considered an enemy to them. If you're neutral to them, which is what most inter-NPC stuff is, they won't start a fight. Unaggressive means they won't pick a fight ever. So like they'll basically just stand there until you start punching them, and then even then they might run away.
That's a bit bad. Yeah, I should change that then. We don't want that. I'll change that, set it up. That's good.
There we go. Yeah, aggressive is ideal because then they'll actually, if an enemy shows up, they'll actually engage with them voluntarily without having to wait to let the enemy get the first crack in. And I noticed a few real quick for people in chat. I noticed a few of you have been tagging me with questions, and I apologize. I haven't been able to get to those. It's going to be very difficult for me to stop and read chat constantly while trying to have this conversation. So if any of you are still around toward the end, I will open up to questions, and then you guys can re-ask those same questions, and I will definitely address them. So apologies if it's stuff you wanted to talk about that was relevant to a particular topic. It's just not going to be useful. It's going to be very difficult for me to have conversation with guests while engaging with you guys chat. So apologies. Maybe we'll come up with a way to do this in the future, and maybe we'll add more stops to take questions throughout this format. We're still working it out. So at the end of this stream, if any of you guys liked this and you would tune in for another modding live, and you have some suggestions for how we can improve the format, definitely let me know. So shoot me a message on whatever social media or simsettlements.com or Nexus Mods, and we'll keep evolving this format. Okay, so let's go back to your list because I think we've gotten derided from actually doing any actual modding and have just been chatting.
No, I think we're good. I think there's just one final of the big things, and that's the one we have sort of it's a very small starting up quest. It's so I'm setting a message on the mod page that you start this mod up by going to Jalbert Brothers Disposal and investigate.
Okay.
Because you have the Children of Atom lying there. And then you find a blueprint for the War Planet desk and like a journal from the little dead Children of Atom.
Okay.
And you have a challenge. You have one of those skull cups with a goo in them.
Okay.
That you drink.
Nice.
And then I stole part of the when you meet the Mother of the Fog.
Okay.
So I put on those iMod, the effect, so it gets blurry, and
nice.
I started up a rad storm, and there's the sound effects and things. And then I thought that wasn't really enough, so I wanted to get the player's health down too, so you'd feel sort of that this is something dangerous happening. So I put the player's health down. I gave them rads.
Okay.
Down to, and I said my problem is I don't really understand the base health and the mathematics behind how to deal with it. So if it's a low level character, it'll work. Right now, if you're high level, you die. So that's
okay.
Not ideal.
Yeah, that's not ideal at all.
Yeah. But after that, actually, when you survive, the spell ends and you get you can choose a perk.
Okay.
That will let you, the more irradiated you are, actually I keep forgetting what I gave them. Something. something.
Oh, you got something
Yeah,
good.
You
also crippled them for a while.
Yes. I also thought it wasn't enough. I wanted them to get to the, when you hear the heartbeat, when it's sort of dung dung, so you feel like you really, this is bad.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to cripple them, which actually worked, but you can heal yourself with a stim pack, so that was a bit of a problem.
Yeah, so setting AVs with scripts is very wonky. It does not work well.
Yeah.
It's also wonky to do with magic effects. It's really like their AV system is really sketchy. This is just a common problem. But what I would do is just look at try and use a vanilla script if you can. So if you look, or a vanilla spell. So like if we look at something like, I'm looking at the spell list right now. Like something like a hazard or a poison, something like that. So if we look at like something like fire hazard, you can see that there's a damage health thing. So you could just set that set up a magic effect that's a one-time damage health for whatever magnitude you want, and you just have to I think this is another thing that I don't know the answer to offhand, but I think it's your baseline health is 100, and then. But you can find out.
Then I did a really. I thought it was very clever. I'm gonna see if I can find my script again, because I actually checked how much what the health the player had, and then I subtracted enough so they would have 30 HP left,
Okay.
and gave the rads to put them down. So I'm not sure what's going wrong. I think there's something with the base health, and then it's modified, and or I just wrote
Yeah,
things wrong.
get base value is like what is the max, and then get value is the current health is what it's supposed to do. But yeah, you can definitely run into weird things with, like, there's a problem with Workshop Plus for some players, where when they go into flight mode, if they have rads, it kills them, and I have no idea why. And somebody figured it out in chat recently, and I just completely flaked on it. There was nothing I could do about it as far as the way we have it set up, but this is just like one of those oddities with the way actor values work. Is that some of them, sometimes you end up, when you try and do damage to them through scripts, you can create a situation where they can die depending on how their configuration is. So it's risky to do. It might be such that what might make more sense is to just like spawn a radiation hazard on top of them. That might be a better way to do this. So that way, like, then the radiation just hits them and they have a chance to run away. And like they'll get the concept still. Maybe do something like that to where you give the player control of it.
I think that could make sense, because the way it's done in Far Harbor, they do it so they give the player a certain amount of rads, but it's nowhere near as much as I do. So you don't really get into that sort of dangerous feeling. And I mean, it makes sense because some players probably prepare for this and come, so they won't take that much damage.
Right. Ideally, it would be something like it drops them down to 10% of their health or something. But it might be such that there's not an effective way to do that in this game without also blocking stim packs from working. I will say that if you what you would theoretically do is you would use the function mod value. So that's what you're supposed to use. I just find it to be highly unreliable. But doing something like, I'll just write a script in Discord here, and hopefully people on stream can see it. But I would do something like game.getPlayer.getValue, I think it's getHealthAV is the function.
Get value health. If you do get value health, but I think that's the one that's not. I'm not sure if it's getting the base health.
So it would be something like this. So F max health equals.
That's true. I remember seeing that.
So it would be max health equals game.get base value. And this is a horribly inefficient script. I'm like grabbing things instead of storing them into variables. But it would look something like this. This would get you their max health and their current health. Let me send that to you. So that should get their max health and then their base health. And then you would just basically calculate, what is the health you actually want to set them to, look at their current health, and then you do mod value whatever. So then it would be, let's say we want them to be, if we wanted to set them to 10% of max health, we'd calculate out what is 10% of that, so multiply by 0.1, look at their current health, and then figure out the difference to get them to that, and then do mod value on health to make sure that they end up at that particular value. That should work without via script, and it shouldn't stop stim packs, and it shouldn't kill them theoretically.
No, it's actually the damage doesn't kill them. It was a crippling that didn't work with the stim pack. So
it became permanent.
Yeah.
Oh, where you were doing the condition again. I think if you want to do mod value, because if you do set value, it actually alters the base, and that's why they would permanently be set to 0.
Mod value.
Mod value.
That's perfect. This is great. Then I can get back to it, because this was really.
You can get back to crippling us, huh? Great work, Susan.
Yes.
If you want to make this even more epic, you said you want something. There's an animation we did for the distillery that makes it so your character like passes out, and then there's another animation for them to stand up groggily, so you could play those animations.
I like that. I mean, because
maybe play some coughing noises too. So.
I'm gonna take a look at the brewery quest. I know you did that, but I hadn't actually checked how it played out and what happened.
There's just a couple of there's a couple of loose animations that are idles that you can tap into, and they'll do that.
Perfect. I'll have a look at them. because I wanted it to be like in the beginning. And this was the first quest I ever did, so I didn't have the knowledge to make it as elaborate.
Okay.
So I wanted to be like a quick thing that still would give you a sense of being for a reason to be doing this faction. So that was the. But I think I can actually get that. Did we have anything else on the list? Yeah, the sub-spawner plot. But I'll actually, I think I'll send you that script
Okay.
if you're okay with that, because I think that's the one. I don't want to cause problems with performance, and like you said, making sure that they're deleted properly. That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to send me that script, I'll take a look at it. Do I already have that
Very,
one?
very sweet. But I don't think. I think that was all, wasn't it? I think, did we have anything else on the list?
I see something there was something about dogs. There was something you wanted to rename some dogs.
Yes. But I think that one we can do. Actually, that's Myra's. He's been wanting that for a long time, and I think with one of your latest mod school videos with the activate perk, you can give them a perk to activate. I think we can figure something out for that.
Yeah, somebody just said something in chat I want to address. The dog face zombie said, "Well, this looks complicated." Yeah, some of the stuff we're talking about right now is pretty complicated. If you're coming in this stream and you've never modded, you're gonna want to go get a baseline of knowledge from the Bethesda Mod School series I do on YouTube, and then it'll be a lot easier to follow along with some of this stuff, because any of the people I bring on for this modding live are going to have a fair amount of experience already. So if you're trying to learn from this, it's going to be difficult because you won't have a lot of the baseline knowledge. So for the dog thing, what I would do is, have you experimented with renaming things with aliases? Have you done any of that yet?
The only thing is the thing you do in Conqueror, where you set up aliases for the recruits. There are the different levels.
It's the same way. So you would set up your alias the same way with the name. But the function that you use is apply to ref. So you would do, so you set up your alias property. So I'm going to just type this up, a little pseudocode here. So you would have something like reference alias property, dog name, spot, and then you would configure that in the CK to point to that alias. And it's the same way I have you set up those names for your ranks, where it's just a message that's set up on an alias as the display name, and then I think it's uses stored text, and at the very bottom right of the alias screen there's a checkbox. Actually, let me just bring one up, because that way anybody watching can see what the heck I'm talking about. So let's see, soldier manager. Do I have this set up here? I think I might have it set up. Bringing up an alias. Hopefully the resolution is not miserable on this. Okay, this is a terrible example. All right, I'll just create a new alias and just close this out. But so you select a message that has your display name you want for the character, and then you check in uses stored text. You check in clear name when removed in the upper right. Uses stored text, and then you check can apply data to non-aliased refs. So if you and optional. So if you have all of those checkboxes done, so it's you pull a display name, which will check in use stored text, check in optional, otherwise your quest won't start. Check in clear name when removed, so that way the NPC has the ability to change the name. If you don't check in clear name when removed, then that NPC will never be able to have their name changed again, which is a problem. And then can apply data to non-aliased refs means you could apply this to multiple NPCs, and you don't have to keep that NPC in the alias, because if you keep them in the alias, so if you set up a ref collection and you put them in an alias, that NPC is kept in memory forever as long as they're in the alias. So no matter where you are in the world, that NPC gets added, is kept in memory, and that can be a big problem after you do that to so many. So there's one of the problems that people have run into with Conqueror when they do the pre-start, and the reason I tell people is just stay in the vault until it's done, even if it takes 6 hours, is let your game run, is because there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets stored in ref collection aliases temporarily, and it just overflows your memory. So then if you go start playing the rest of the game, it makes it much more likely that you will use more memory than your system has, especially on Xbox, and then the game just crashes when that happens. So
But you
that
would
so
be avoiding if you stayed in one cell. You wouldn't even this wouldn't happen to you because they're just temporary. The storage in the object references that are stored.
right, exactly. By the
Yeah.
time, because all that stuff, and usually it's something like the vault or the pre-war area. It's such a
Mm.
small area; it doesn't have many references loaded anywhere, so I can just
Yeah.
really abuse the memory usage in Conqueror, and so like I say, if you wait, then it dumps all those aliases. But that's why you got to be careful with putting things in an alias. Is that those get stuck in memory until they're removed from the alias. And this is where that can apply data to non-aliased refs is very powerful, as it allows you to stamp different information. So you can stamp a name on there. You can apply factions this way. You can apply keywords. Aliases are super, super powerful for allowing you to dynamically change an NPC in a variety of ways without having to reference alias them or run a bunch of scripts. So for example, let's say we wanted to add an NPC to a new faction, stamp them with a keyword, change their AI package all in one go. We can do that with the alias. And then if we want to remove all those things, we don't then have to later call a bunch of functions that are like remove from faction, remove keyword, adjust AI package. Instead, we just remove that reference alias from them, and now all that stuff gets removed in one go. So it's really powerful system.
They don't stay in the alias, so the quest doesn't have to be running, or how does it? Because
The quest does have to be running.
Oh yeah.
But they don't stay in the alias. But it basically, whenever that NPC, I guess the way it's done is, I don't know that the engine level. I'm just theorizing here. But basically, what it would be is, whenever the NPC loads up again, it has some sort of like reference to that alias, so it knows that all right, once we load, we'll take all this information from the alias and put it back on them as if they were in the alias while they're loaded naturally.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me.
All right.
So then basically, if I'm going back to my code that I started typing to you in Discord, so we have reference alias property, dog name spot, and then you would know whatever your function was to get access to it. So if we do the perk activation like I showed in that tutorial, then we could do like a function rename, and we send it an actor. So let's say actor ak dog ref, and then in our function, we would do the reference alias property name. So in this case, dog name spot dot apply to ref, and then the actor reference. And now so this little tiny bit of code right here, that would rename the dog to spot. And so then you could have, it doesn't have to be that simple either. You could say something like, maybe you give them a pop-up message with 10 options. So then maybe they were like 1 through 10, and then you would just instead here, you could send rename, send an integer as well. So like or maybe let's try this. Maybe it was, maybe we want to send them, we do all the pop-up in the code. So we just like present them a rename thing. So then we could have a message property that's a message you set up in the CK. That's rename selector. I'm going to rewrite this a little bit here. So we're going to do reference alias as an array, and we're going to call it dog names as the property. So let's say you set up a message that's going to be your rename selector. Then instead of doing, so then our rename function will rename it, and I'm typing all this up in Discord so I can send it right to you, Tinuvia.
Yeah.
Okay. Dog ref, we do the same way here. But what we're going to do instead is we're going to go int I name index equals rename selector, and I'll show you guys watching on Discord. I'll show you how the message object should look to make this work. Rename selector dot show. Now, if it's a message box type, what will happen is a message dot show. If it's a message box type, once the player selects the option, it will return a number back in that function, and that's what iname index is. And then we just make sure that our reference aliases in the array are in the same order as the names in our message, and then we can just apply that one. So then it's, then we do, where's the thing? Dog names, name index dot apply to ref, aka dog ref. So a function like this, so I just send it to you, and then I'll show what the message would look like in the CK here. So then instead of just setting up the spot reference alias, you set up however many you want. So maybe you set up like 10 different reference aliases.
Yes.
And those are going to be your properties. And then in our message, if we go to miscellaneous message, and we'll just set up a new message. As long as you check in message box up here, And then we can do, you would give it an ID, the message text, and it would be like, so for the next message text, we do choose a name for your dog. And then down in the menu buttons, we would do name 0, say we do Spot. Number 1 is Bingo, etc. And you just give as many dog names as you want to present to the player. I think by default, the creation kit can present 18 options. That's not actually an engine limit. You can actually go into Xedit with your mod and add more entries and then come back into the CK and edit them. It can support, I haven't found a limit yet. So with the leader traits, I think we have on the commander traits, we have over 80 entries now. It seems like the game can handle as many as you want. The CK just tries to limit you. But then as long as when you define those properties, so if we look at our quest here, so when you go into the CK, you're going to have that dog names property that you can point to the reference aliases. Just make sure each one of those reference aliases with the names attached to them matches the order of your buttons, and it'll work. So then you can provide a name selector for any NPC.
That's very clever. That would work. So we're going to try this, but first we'll get the faction pack out, and then we'll get
then you'll go back and rename dogs.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is exactly how they've got it set up in the Creation Club stuff. I think they just their number of options I think is pretty. I don't remember how big it is. I haven't really gotten into the dog thing. I actually find the dog startup quests to be one of the most obnoxious parts of Creation Club. But
yeah, but there's only the thing is that's a bit odd though, because I found we haven't bought the Creation Club contents, but still the source files are in the vanilla game. So I don't know why, but they're in. If you look at the source, you can find the Creation Club for the dogs.
I think they did that because there's like a dozen different dogs, as they didn't want to have to keep repackaging the code for each one. So they're like, all right, we'll just put it in the main game, which makes sense. Yeah. And it's a benefit to us because then we get access to those scripts at least.
Yeah, because I mean, it's always good because when Myra talked about doing this, I was a bit scared because I know they did it in the Don't Call Me Settler. Yeah. And I know that there were some things that mod did that broke settlers, but I thought that maybe the dog thing could be more safe, but I wasn't sure. So we haven't really started looking at it.
Don't Call Me Settler actually, because that mod was doing a lot more than just renaming settlers. The renaming part was totally safe. It was some of the other stuff they were doing that was using functionality in a way that Bethesda didn't intend. And then when they updated their code before they released the CK, so like I actually am in defense of Bethesda here, is the reason that they hadn't yet like finalized everything for modders to go ham on it. They hadn't released the CK yet. So I don't think they were at fault. It was really just, this is one of the risks of building mods before Bethesda says go for it, because they decided to change some engine level code. So then it caused something that DCMS was doing to break save games.
Aha, I see. Okay, good. So if we look at that mod, anything that we see that, I mean, we'd have to check things first, but like you said, the renaming would probably be safe.
Yeah, you could probably reuse their name thing directly. You could probably reuse their scripts as is. I haven't looked through it to see how to do it, but I'm almost 100. I'm like 99% positive they did it virtually the same way I did, probably just with some variations on the specifics of the code, and maybe they did it more complex or less complex. I don't know, but I'm sure it's the same thing of having a bunch of reference aliases and some sort of message option that comes up that you select from.
That's perfect. Yeah, we'll take a look at that too. I think that's actually everything on the list. So this was perfectly very helpful, and you've given us a lot of things to round up the faction pack and hopefully get it out there soon before people stop playing the game.
That's one of the things that actually reinvigorated me with the modding, and is when Fallout 76 came out, and it was like, oh, this is not for us. Like, this is not for Fallout 4 single player and lovers. Like, it's a totally different audience they're targeting, because they ditched on some of the key components of that make up the experience, I think, for people who play a lot of mods. And I don't think that that's going to change even when they add in the quests. I think the whole exploring by yourself and being able to like grow, role play and grow up to be kind of a god character over time. I don't think you can have that in a multiplayer game. And you also can't have an actual impact on the world. There's no persistence in that game. So I think that the game is forever going to have problems for people like us. So I think like it's not going away. People aren't going to stop playing Fallout 4 until Fallout 5 comes out, and that's assuming Fallout 5 doesn't go the same direction as 76. So I assume we probably got 6-7 years before people are done with Fallout 4.
Yeah, and because you're right. I mean, a lot of the players who play Fallout 4 have characters that they sort of live with for a long time, and they connect to them. So I think that if you don't
It's
get
a different
that,
kind of game.
yeah,
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
You're right about that.
Yeah, so it's so I would say you have all the time in the world to pursue your ideas. But
Don't say that.
yeah, we
Don't
want. But
say
yeah,
it.
please
Because-
also release.
Yeah.
If you never
Susan-
release, then
Susan has
you're not a
curse,
creator.
And that's she really, really wants it to be perfect. So I've been saying you have a deadline. You have to put this mod out there.
Yeah.
And this has been going on for months. So even though you're right in principle,
Yeah.
she really needs to hear that. Yes, you need to put that mod right out there right now. You have 2 days.
Yeah.
So don't encourage that.
Real creators release. It doesn't matter how. If you only create everything in a vacuum, you didn't create anything.
You release.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
And
that-
but that's the thing also, because I mean that's what's so good with. I think you set a good model for that with the updates. I mean, you don't have to have everything that you want in the first release. You can
Right.
keep adding to it.
There's definitely something to be said about first impressions. That's important, and
Yeah.
like definitely, I'm more leery about releasing pseudo complete stuff after all these experiences. But I also think that doing things in chunks is a good idea. So like maybe, don't try and release stuff just because you think it kind of works. Like definitely I would say the stuff you are releasing should be polished enough so that people will get a good feel for it. But I think, if you're, so for example, you're talking about doing all these custom custom unique NPCs, like those could make a nice chunk of content on their own without detracting from everything else by not having them. That's kind of how I've been approaching with the patches is we try and like take chunks of content that would work nicely together. Same thing with even our story patches for Conquerors. We tend to make like a little story arc that feels complete and feels good that we can do in one patch so that, it doesn't feel like completely disjointed from itself. But
'Cause
there's,
that makes sense. Yeah, because then the player can sort of finish that while they're waiting for the next patch. So, I mean, if you give them something that's not really like a closed arch, it's going to be in a bit more frustrating. So I think you're right.
it's a tough line to walk, but I think it's necessary, especially when you're doing something that's just a passion project like this, where there's no, there's no threat looming over you to force you to release anything.
Yeah.
So like what Myrm was saying is like
It can
you need to
always
just
be
force
better,
yourself
and you
a
can always
deadline.
do
Yeah,
more.
yeah, exactly. The perfectionist curse. You could go forever deep down that rabbit hole trying to pursue perfection.
Yeah.
And she is a perfectionist.
No.
So it's
We
Oh,
can, we
a
can
no.
tell with
problem.
your work, and we appreciate it. It's really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, coming from one the same. Yeah, but this was really, really good. Thank you very much for taking the time for this. And I
no
think
problem.
even if maybe this wasn't all too helpful for other faction pack authors in this shape, I think sometimes you can go back to them and see more and get ideas. For us, it was very, very helpful anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll try and for people watching, I'll probably try and do more specific stuff. I think people would like probably to see us actually completing things and showing it in game and stuff. So maybe we can approach it like that in the future. Some of the problems you came to me are pretty complicated and deeper stuff, and that's okay too. This stuff, I'm sure there are other people who are mod authors working on this stuff that they'll have found value of it, and maybe people not watching it live, but people can go back and watch this, like you said, later, maybe pick this stuff up, or if they just listen to it in the background, kind of like a podcast, maybe one of us will say a keyword that catches their attention, like, oh, I've been wanting to do that, and then they can go look in and check it out, and they can also then know, I'm approachable on simsettlements.com if people need to ask me questions, and now they know I know the answer, and I'm sure you two are as well. As far as if people, now that you've solved these problems, if somebody else runs into them, they could reach out to you to get assistance. Is that fair to say?
Sorry.
Yeah. I would say so.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. Well, I guess before we let you go off and finish your faction pack so you can release, I guess now is a good time to open up to questions. So I apologize to everybody in chat I know you guys were tagging me in questions throughout the stream. Anybody who has any questions for me, Myrm or Tinuvia, throw them out there. I'll reread them here, and we can start. We could chat with the audience a little bit here. But I'm glad I was able to solve these problems for y'all, because these are the exact type of things I assumed that some people would have. They would have these good ideas, and just be stuck in the weeds on some sort of implementation hookup or have no idea how to approach it. And if you get into a point where when you guys are starting to implement some of these ideas we talked about, if you need more help, don't be a stranger about reaching out to me. And in particular, I'm happy to send you the source files. Like you two, I would have no problem sending the source files to.
Yeah. Because I think I wanted to do as much as I could on my own, so you'd at least see that, because I think it's really hard. Sometimes you get approached with someone wanting you to do the work for you, and we really don't. I think for me, it's mostly this is also a way I want to learn. I want to get better. So it helped a lot looking at your scripts and how you're structuring things, and like you said, the safety measures you take, and that's been really a learning process that's been fun, actually, very good.
I think also because I'm not a programmer and we've been building this mod together and we've been able to discuss things, and it worked very well. When we ran into problems, we could always reach out to each other and say, how did you solve this? But in this instance, when she's making the mod pack, I've been no help at all. So this is really helpful for us that she can talk to you about these things.
Yeah. Sometimes those little chats like this help get you unstuck, just talking out the problem aloud too.
Because I think that's generally, because we're a couple, we can help chat things with each other. So I think that's what helps us being kept going since when we first released Wasteland Ventures. Because I think for many others, it's a bit of a lonely thing you're doing on your own. And that's why the Discord is so good, because then you at least have friends there you can talk to and you get help and you get sort of motivation to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, modding is lonely work. I think I remember where I said this recently. It was in a podcast or something, but it was like, if you're going to get into modding, you need to set yourself up a support network, because it's a lonely hobby. Like it's very much, it's like you're very isolated. And it requires a lot of concentration and a lot of like doing kind of crappy work like there's a lot of like boring parts of it as well. It's not all just the fun designing buildings or creating art. Like there's also a lot of like technical garbage you have to do. Like some people just despise nav meshing, for example. And there's a lot of little stuff like that.
And it's all those things that when you do that don't work, that are sort of behind the thing that actually does work. You feel like, why did I waste so much time doing this? And that's the most silly thing, is then you do it 3 months later and you've forgotten how you did it, so you have to start relearning it again.
I'll tell you what, that is why I document as much as I do. It's for me more than sharing and letting other people do it. It's like, I know in 6 months I'm gonna forget how to do this, so now I can read my own documentation.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I really should do that too.
All right, I guess everybody who had questions have moved on from them. I haven't seen any questions popping up in chat or anything. But yeah, definitely feel free to reach out again. If there's any things like these little technical details are hanging you up, that's something I want to be available for to people, just because it's really, I definitely can't so like you said, you don't want people to, or you didn't want to feel like you were just asking me to do the work for you, and I appreciate that. And that's why like this type of thing is not something I can just open up to the masses. Like I can't just be like, all right, anybody with a mod question, like I'll have you on my thing and I'll walk you through it, is because I need to assume people have at least made the effort to learn the baseline of things, and you two have for sure. And so like that, this is, there's definitely, even after you learn a bunch of stuff and you take all the time in the world to research things, sometimes a problem, you could just be approaching a problem in a way that's not going to work ever, or you're thinking about it in a way that's not really how, like there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of tutorials and information people have posted where they think it's how it's working. Even I've done that. I've posted some information where I'm like, I'm pretty sure this checkbox does this. And then like that bad information can get propagated. So sometimes being able to just talk out a problem like this is going to be the only way to solve it. And so we can kind of put our heads together.
Yeah, but it really helped a lot, because there was like, and it's sort of like once I started thinking this is probably how it is, I sort of got stuck on that road. So it helps to sort of back up and see that, okay, this is how it needs to be done. That was really helpful.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can continue to get that stuff unstuck for you guys as you go, because I'm really excited to see this faction pack. And somebody asked what's the overall theme idea for the faction pack. It's all Children of Adam, right?
Yes, it's all children of Adam, and mostly because I think that there's a lot of resources already in the main game, and especially for Harbor. But it's also sort of I like the idea of sort of having some crazy people running around with.
They have this wonderful mumbling dialogue that you can have. There's a lot of fun stuff in there.
So we're thinking
Yeah.
of preachers going around mumbling, or we can recreate. I keep forgetting what his name is in Skyrim. The guy who keeps Talos priest.
Yeah, the
Oh
priest
yeah,
and-
yeah. So I don't know if you all have used this yet, but if you haven't, go do so before you release, just so you can see it, because you can actually steal the NPC and spawn them yourselves. If you go into our Echo Lake Lumber city plan from Rise of the Commonwealth, we actually have a custom voiced preacher for the Children of Adam in there that gets spawned, I think at level 2 or level 3, and they just
Awesome.
they talk about like praise be to the glory of Adam, and they'll just like
Yes,
they'll
yes.
just chant periodically, and they do it pretty loud.
That's what we want to do too, and we want to have churches, and that's the I think for the end I was thinking about the like having virtual units that will be stronger and stronger. In the end, they will be like mother of fogs that will be very very dangerous, and they will be whispering.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what you all do with special units, because that's special
Yeah.
units are one of the things that I was really excited about when released, but I haven't seen a ton of faction packs take advantage of them yet, and I think it's because it's actually a really complicated idea of giving not just equipment, because anybody can have equipment, but like of giving maybe special abilities or attacks or spells or whatever to differentiate them. It's actually a pretty tall order to do something like that.
Yeah, because so far we have three units that we have done, but they're only like say faction. They have special outfits and special weapons. But
Yeah.
we looked at the attack data, but I don't know how much difference it really makes. I think we need to tweak that a bit more.
So actually, that's something I can show you. So we actually did something. I figured that out recently, and I have barely scratched the surface of it. This is one of the things also that gets dangerous with modding, is like once you kind of peek under the hood at a certain thing and you see all the possibilities, it can be very tempting to just like go all in on that. So I recently figured out some of that attack data stuff, and I was like, oh my god, this looks like so much fun. I could do so many cool things, and I had to stop myself. But here's something I did.
I mean, it seems
In
like
there it lies the rub.
Yeah.
Susan keeps finding things that this will be so cool.
Yeah. And we found like a
And
lot
off
of
she
the
goes.
raiders. Yeah, the raiders have are more diversified than most of the other enemies in the game, and they have a bit more different attack data anyway. Yeah, but like Myra says, it's easy to get derailed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm trying to find where I stuck this, but I figured out that you could make spells be cast during certain attack data. And I think I have it set up for Bedlam. So they're in the Conqueror storyline. You eventually meet a pair of siblings that are they're running cults. One of them's like a fire cult, and the other is kind of a Cthulhu themed cult, which is actually in the vanilla lore. So we didn't add any of this. We try not to make up too much of our own lore, because we want this stuff to feel immersive. But one of the things I wanted something to like feel very Cthulhu like. So I have it set up whenever this character does a power attack, it casts a fear spell. And I used the graphic from Lorenzo, where it shoots this like ball of energy out from him, and I modified it to be like a black and purple color. And like so you can do stuff like that, like you can trigger it off a power attack. I think that's a great place to inject.
Does the fear spell, does it? Yeah, so it actually works. It works on the opponents.
Yeah, it actually works. So that was something we did, but like this is one with the attack data. You can kind of you can add spells into there, which is pretty cool. It's especially useful for melee, because there's a lot of different things. Like if you dig into some of the creatures, like if you look at Yaguai or blowflies or whatever, a lot of their attack data will have spells that are tied in with the attack, so you can get some ideas there on ways you could differentiate your units. So you're definitely on the right track there. Attack data is a good spot to play with.
I would never thought that you could use the creatures but like you said, they're all actors. It's just NPCs, so you can take those ideas and move them onto the special units.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, your special units are just another NPC. Like that was one of the things when we set out to set up Conqueror. We knew we wanted to have some interesting units that you could use for the raiders to make it more entertaining, but also because whenever when we set out to do the Conqueror quest line, the idea was we need to set up some sort of template for people to learn from who want to add content in the same way like with Sim Settlements, that technically it's a framework mod, but it includes a lot of content because we needed to have, well, first of all, it needed to function out of the box. So it has a lot of building plans and stuff in it, even though ideally Sim Settlements would just be code, and that way it would be a really tiny mod. But we needed to have at least a baseline amount of content so people could play with it right away. And then it also serves as teaching tools for people who want to go add. And so a lot of the Conqueror stuff is the same way. So with the, like you can see we did the dogs, like you can play mutant hounds and stuff. That was just to show, that was really like I knew from the get-go when I gave the project to Super Weevil, our lead writer, I was like, we need a Beastmaster character in this story somewhere because we need to be able to show like this isn't just soldiers. You can add whatever creatures you want. So you have a template there for that too, of if you have some sort of creature that would make sense to team up with the Children of Adam, you could set that up. Like maybe they start taming some sort of like what are the bugs that have the ichor that can be converted into nuclear material? Maybe they've tamed whatever those are, but you know what I mean. Like you can do whatever. You can be anything. You can use literally any actor you want in the game can become a special unit.
Yeah, because that's we have that. We want that. And I mean, like you said, there's lots of. They can be the just glowing versions of the anything from mole rat to red stacked up, and then I think there's a lot of things that helps that you already have. That's just the thing that I keep thinking is I don't want to completely copy Maul because he's such a cool creature. But I mean, we need to do it in our own way. But and actually, because it's so good to have the template there, and it makes it so much easier. But I also want to make sure that I don't do things that feel like we're just copy pasting your things. That would be so unfair to you, all the writers who've done all the work.
Well, I know a lot of people have been asking if we're going to add a way to like take some of our characters and make them accessible for people who don't want to play through the Raider quest line, which is something we would love to do. But man, the amount of work it takes to get a fully fleshed out NPC to where they have multiple dialogue paths and can react to your choices is it's staggering to think about how much work goes into a game like Fallout 4. So then whenever I see people like, man, we are spoiled as gamers when we like are slamming a game like this with the amount of effort that went into it. But somebody asked something unrelated to modding. What's the wallpaper you have? They very much appreciate it.
Oh, I think that's actually that's not even my photo. It's some the Windows 10s screensavers.
Oh, it's just one of the default ones that comes with it.
Yeah, because I keep the ones I like because I used to have more personal things, and then when I take it for work or something, it's it always gets into weird situations. So now it's all just neutral screensavers. But I really like this one. This is something for Sim Settlements, like this really weird hut.
Yeah, you can definitely build that into a building that would fit in well.
Yeah.
I actually love a lot of the wallpapers that come with Windows. I think they're really, really good shots and high res. They're really nice looking.
That's really good.
Okay. Oh, and somebody just said congrats, Myrmarachne, for making the finalists. I guess the word got out. We're still working on tour videos to get a proper vote out, so that we can get that done. But we're doing like really high end. Like trailers, so that the videos will just be like an awesome prize in themselves to have before we release those for public voting. So it'll probably be that the voting for the October contest happens before the Masters contest, even though that's out of order what they actually occurred, just because we have so much work to do.
I really thought I wouldn't make it this time because the other ones, the contest must have been a tough one to choose from with the other city plans. They were really cool.
Oh my god, there's so many great ones. That was the hardest voting I've ever had to do. It was just so many cool designs. Very excited to get those out to people and melt some systems because there's a couple of them are real intense. But sorry, Xbox players, you won't be able to play all of them. Let's see.
It was fun to build it. It was a great contest.
I'm glad a lot of you stepped up to it, because it was it's a hell of a settlement to tackle. Like, it's intimidating to just even get started on a project like that.
Yeah, but and the scale was completely different. If you build some other city plans and you think, oh, I just can't fit anymore in the area, I just have to give up. But I know that everyone else have to do the same. But
Yeah.
here you have to stop because your computer starts complaining, not because the build limit is up there. So yeah, I started feeling lag, a lot of lag. I thought I really needed it to be a city plan you could actually play in,
Yeah.
not just some eye candy.
Right.
That didn't work for me. So I needed it to be the right size, so it feels fun.
Yeah.
And the lure was there to, oh, I just have to add a little bit more. Oh, you know the curse. You keep
Oh,
adding
yeah.
and adding. And
Oh yeah,
yeah,
and a
it was
space like
fun.
that big, and then like when you're playing on PC, you can turn off all the build limits, and it's real easy to just go crazy. That's
Oh
what
yeah.
that's what happened to my sanctuary design that I'm doing on my Let's Play. There's probably a dozen people who are watching who are going to actually be able to play my city plan when I release it,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
I went so over that. It's like, oh, I'm up to 100 plots now. Maybe I should stop.
It looks great though, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's getting really out of hand.
Yeah.
I'm so surprised you can actually load that thing.
Yeah, I figured eventually it'll get to a point where I can't, and I'll have to just use one of my old saves to build the city plan from. I'm like, all right, well, I killed that
Yeah.
save, so we'll roll back a little bit. I've been keeping as many of them as I can afford the space on. It's crazy how fast your saves take up your hard drive space too when you're keeping
Oh, yeah.
multiple iterations of them.
They get big.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I really liked. I watched it. For us, it was this morning. The last Let's Play you did. I really like what you were doing with the back entrance, with the vault and the looting and the. I think it was a good change. It made the whole settlement come alive in a new way.
Yeah, I love doing stuff like that. And that's something like I cheated. I had Don Strong come on and tell me what to do, because he is a master at that. Like my favorite designs in ROTC were usually the ones he was in charge of, because he tends to spend way too much time thinking about stuff like that. Like, what would they be using in the world? What kind of resources are nearby that they would be harvesting and living on and building from? And it's like, it really takes them to takes those settlements to the next level.
Yeah,
Yep.
and they get very organic, and it's like you say, they everything in his plans makes sense. So they're still very decorative. So I think he does an amazing job too.
Yeah. Well, you're no slouch yourself, Myrm. Your city plans that you've been like almost every time you enter, you win the contest. So clearly, you got some skills yourself, sir.
And the thing is that he plays on permadeath, and he refuses to go back to characters who died. So there's several settlements that are so wonderful that he won't even touch. He won't finish them.
Oh,
And I'm gonna
they're
steal
dead.
his
They're dead
saves.
to me.
One steal the save and.
The Undead series of city plans. Here's a bunch of
yes, that's a good one.
I'm always shocked when because what we do for the finalists in the city plan contest is we handle their exporting for them as a little thank you, because that's kind of an obnoxious step sometimes, and every time we are dealing with your saves, we're like, why does he do this in survival mode? What is wrong with him?
I finally got him to use Workshop Plus, but he hasn't
very
gotten.
unorthodox.
Yes.
No.
Oh, because now you're flying around in survival mode.
Oh yes. Oh, that's not good.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
very
very,
nice, actually.
And he
it's
came
definitely
back-
like I was like like the whole concept behind that mod is like, what if I just said to hell with immersion, and like let's just add tools that make
Exactly.
building better. Because really, what I actually want is to just have the creation kit in the game, but that's not feasible.
Yeah. I can't. I actually tried to build some things for our little for the faction pack. I tried to build just to make them some place to stay, because it's not just plopping down sleeping bags. And it's so frustrating. I can't understand how people can build in game. It's so much easier doing it in creation kit.
Yeah, having like snap to nav mesh and manually like carefully aligning
Finding
things by
things in the
digit.
menus.
Oh
And
yeah,
I keep
that's a
looking
nightmare.
at what she's doing and saying, "Your settlers are dying. You have to help them." I don't care. I'm modding, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, God, I would kill for a search function in game in the workshop menu.
Yes.
Oh my God,
But
it's so
I'm
it's so
thinking
hard
that
to find.
when they changed the UI for Skyrim,
Yeah.
that I keep forgetting. Sky UI is so much more
Yeah.
information that you can find.
Yeah, we
But I guess
definitely don't have as like it seems like we have just as active as a mod community as Skyrim did as far as number of mods being released every week, but we lack the hardcore dedicated people with like engine level skills committed to the game. Like
Yeah.
we don't have like or maybe they're just tied up with their own big giant projects, but yeah, you would have expected somebody by now to rewrite the whole workshop UI to be a little more user friendly and add stuff like that. But it has not happened, unfortunately, and that's not something
No.
I'm going to be tackling anytime soon. That's I've avoided using the script extender to learn it because I know as soon as I learn that, I'm going to have trouble going back and coding for
Yeah.
Xbox players, so they'll lose me. So that'll be no good. And then I hate Flash with a passion, and that's all the UI is all written in. Like it's a struggle enough to make the UI elements I do for my mods, and like so then committing to doing that to rewrite some of Bethesda's baseline stuff. Ugh.
Yeah. That would be a lot of work.
It would be a lot of work, but hopefully somebody will do it. I think I think we're showing the community's not going away. So as soon as somebody joins us who sees the need, maybe they'll step up to the plate and do it. I was really hopeful Reg2K would build something like that. I kept hinting at how much we needed it, and I know he showed me some work in progress stuff he had that was going to improve the workshop system as far as the menus and stuff, but he never released it or finished it, and it was kind of wonky to use still. But what is Flash most similar to language-wise? I don't know. I guess it's kind of like JavaScript, and so like the ActionScript language isn't particularly difficult itself. It's figuring out how to tie it into the actual UI elements is a pain, and then there's limitations on what stuff you can actually send to. That the game will send events out to the UI for. So it's a very like handicapped system as far as what you can do. So you have to like find a lot of ways to like work within this narrow framework of events to get data back and forth between the game and your Flash. So you're not only having to use antiquated technology to design the UI, but you're also handicapped in how you can send and receive data from it. So it's just not fun. Correct. You can't really define events fully because of the way it works. You probably could do way more with F4SE, but personally I prefer to avoid F4SE at all costs, just so that I can make sure the mods will work for Xbox players. Because I feel like abandoning half the player base is not good form. I mean, it would be the same thing if like game developers decided to only develop for people who are on RTX 2080s this year. Like that would suck for most of us. So. I feel the same way about supporting console players. Is like just choosing to only support people who have the latest and greatest isn't fair.
No.
Okay, well, this has been a lot of fun. I hope to see your faction pack really soon. And yeah, it sounds like we need to. Everybody needs to send Tinuvia messages in 2 days, and like, all right, how much longer? How much longer? How much longer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
She's gonna
Mom,
need
are
it.
we there yet?
I was actually hoping to have put a beta version or something on Discord to get some input while we do the sort of the promo around. I mean, just building the pages for Nexus and getting photos and everything will probably take us some time too. So we probably would have a mod that's actually usable before
Yeah.
that. So I was hoping to get feedback from players who actually played Conqueror and Liberator. Who knows?
Having had this discussion with you is going to be a major factor in getting this mod out there in a short order.
Yes,
Fantastic.
Sure, yes, of course.
There are definitely a handful. If you could check, I mean, it's obviously it's hard to keep up with our forums because they're super active, but there's definitely a handful of regulars out there. We tagged most of them with Community Rockstar that play all the mod pretty regularly. Those would be a good group to go after, as far as asking them to actually play your mod and give it a thorough kicking and know that they'll give you valuable feedback.
I have talked to Bully Rock, I think he's called.
Bully Rock is fantastic. Yeah,
because he has all the tactics down. So I was checking because I had a plan to get commanders that were sort of aimed to use specialized vessels, like one for rations and one for equipment and one for wages.
Yeah.
And we can make them sort of with the personality geared towards that. So he helped me picking traits.
Okay.
yeah, there were lots of things that I wouldn't have thought of that he really knows how it works, which is
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, it's one of the shames of my overloaded schedule, and I'm kind of the bottleneck in the whole Sim Settlements pipeline. It's just something I haven't figured out how to resolve yet, but I've never, like, outside of patch notes and the live stream I've done, there's no good documentation like that's easily digestible for the Conqueror Phase 2 mechanics. And outside of the forums, because people like Bully Rook have done exhaustive analytics, and I kind of like it that way in the sense that I gave the opportunity for some players who enjoy exploring game, because I think it's boring when a game just hands you a giant manual and is like, here you go, this is how everything's done. It's fun to be able to like figure out like, oh, I can do this, that's cool, like that feels good to me. But I think we're too far in the wrong direction of lack of documentation that I need to resolve and try and get some explanation of the mechanics.
Yeah, I'm thinking you make up for it because you don't have to go down. You can turn off the needs and you can turn off those things, so you can play it as a very just attack settlements and get on.
Would be just for the mod authors, really.
Yeah,
I mean, the player doesn't need it.
Yeah, it would be nice out of the box if it wasn't so like that. I mean, that was kind of why we did the quest line for Conquerors. Like, let's walk them through how they do the baseline mechanics. Like, here's how you set up a raid. Here's how you. This is what vassals do, and like some pop-ups, but not just spamming. Like I always hated at the beginning when you first start the game and you get your first settlement and you get this big giant text thing that comes up, Bethesda pops up, and then it's constantly spamming you with little messages and stuff. Is that felt less good to me. I mean, I like what they did with the Sturgis quest line, but I don't think that went in deep enough. I think that type of quest line should have kept going to do it more immersively as opposed to like constantly spamming you with little messages in the corner telling you to do things. I don't know. It's a tough line to walk.
It's really easy, and I think that's a very important thing to take into account, because I think as a player you just want to get in there playing. You don't want to read long messages. I like reading, but the long messages are not fun. I thought Witcher 3 was a bit hard because there's so long messages you want to go into.
Yeah,
and then I think this, like you say, having a quest line makes much more sense, but it's also much more resource demanding to make.
Oh my god, it's untenable for most people to make. Like that's something I would like to address too. I think there's probably a lot of things we could do with like toolkits and templates to make it easier to make quest content or make NPCs. Like one of the things I have that's coming soon. I've been working on a secret mod with UIT that we'll be releasing sometime soon. I don't know. It's only, I work on it like 1 day a week as a relaxing project. But one of the things it has in it is all of the conditions and quests required to set up a custom settler that has all of the necessary voice lines, so that you don't have to mess with the default dialogue system. So that you could just like clone the quest and then just change the dialogue to what your character would say and then record the lines. Something like that, I think could open up a lot of cool content from people. Is like they know, like a step-by-step guide, like here's how you create a settler with your voice. Like maybe maybe you don't want, not everybody's gonna want that. Not everybody wants to put their voice in the game, but I think it's pretty cheap to get like a decent microphone that could pass in the game. Thanks to podcasting and stuff, there's like you can spend $150 and get a microphone that will do almost studio quality, as long as you're willing to put it in the right space in your house where people could do pretty decent recordings and put their own voice in the characters.
Well, that's what I thought until I listened to one of your podcasts. I don't remember the name, but it was a very interesting podcast with one of your voice directions, I think. Okay. And that made me realize that there's so much more going down to the voice acting and voice.
Well, you can make something that's fun, but to have something that actually sits in the game and doesn't break your immersion in it.
Yeah.
Oh dear, it takes a lot to be able to record a voice that you feel like, oh, this is nice, and not just, oh, this is some guy with a microphone.
Right. Yeah, that's the tough one. Like with a lot of mods for older Bethesda games, it was a lot of, you could hear it was just clearly some guy with his headset mic recording the characters, and it's like, oh, this is cringy. Even though the quest line is really good. Like I've watched Al Chessbreach does that. He plays like all sorts of quest mods, and some of them are just like, oh, that's so hard to listen to those voices. But the quest content is actually really well done.
Yeah, exactly. You want that quest to be as great as it is, but that voice is just it's murdering it.
Oh, Smart Blue Cat is here. All right, so if I give you that template, can you give us an Inigo settler, please?
Yeah.
Yes, need that.
He can be a human. He just he's one of those what is it, pre-Daggerfall Khajiit.
Or if you could just record all the male dialogue and have so you can change voices for the main character.
Oh, that
How
would
much
be
work could that be?
Yeah, nothing, right? Yeah.
You know, that is one of those projects where if I wasn't so like, I don't want to put my own game in the voice because I'm out. I feel like that would be like my voice in the game would be immersion breaking just because I've tried to make myself present in social media and stuff so much that like it would be like if I had been a silent creator and I was just putting out all this stuff, I probably would have done this as a project. But I would love that. I think that would be a fun side project to start recording replacement for all the main character dialogue. I just couldn't do it now because my voice is too well known in the community. But man, that would be a fun project. But it would take forever. I mean, there's like 15,000 lines of dialogue.
But it would be fun. It would be really fun if you could just choose. Oh, what voice do I have today?
Yeah. It'd be real easy to do that too. Like to set up an interface to choose voice type. That would be real easy. It wouldn't be as fancy as like the vanilla character startup thing, but it could be like a pop up that's just like after you do your face that it's like, here's a list of the voices you have installed and it'll choose one for you. Like that would be real easy to set up. We just need people committed to recording 15,000 lines of dialogue. Come on, people, step it up.
You start looking at it and you realize the amount of it's staggering the amount of work to put in there.
Well, that was one of the things we approached with the settler template was reducing it down to like a reasonable amount because the actual those default NPCs. So there's like 7 or 8 voice actors that recorded most of the lines in Fallout 4. And a lot of, even the unique characters, a lot of them use it and all the settlers use it. But in total, it's like each of those actors had to read like 15, like not 15,000, like probably 2,000 lines or something. There's a lot of lines. So it'd be even difficult to replace those. So we pared down our settler thing down to like 220 or 230 lines that are enough to give you the feel of a fleshed out settler without having to fully do all of them. Because I think even just the settlers have probably 500 lines in total with all of the different, the different radiant quests they give out and how they respond. So we cut that number in half of what somebody could do to make a settler that is capable of, being all the vendors and telling you the news about food shortages and saying yes when you give them a command. Like we've figured out which ones were acceptable to cut and left it stripped down. And then that 250 line template we have is assuming you want a fair amount of randomization. If you cut the randomization down so that there's not 3 or 4 variations of each line, it's actually, you could probably do it in under 100 lines. You could make a functioning settler if it was just like 1 line per thing. So I think it's pretty reasonable. Like once we get something like that, or at least we could see more people doing some more custom voiced characters, which I love. Like one of my favorite mods is the Settlers of the Commonwealth, because he just went to the effort of adding in a handful of voiced characters, and they feel so much better than generic settler telling me about their fingernails.
It's just 7 is one of our favorites, but there are so many in Settlers of the Commonwealth that have feel like I think you've done a good job with that with Conqueror too. That just a few lines can give you the personality of the character.
Yeah, you start fleshing them out in your own mind. You give them a life of their own.
Yeah,
so, that's definitely a great mod.
Well, that's one of the reasons that this is another point where add-on pack developers ended up shifting my whole focus for Sim Settlements. So when I originally envisioned Sim Settlements, the idea was that you as the player were just a planner. You had no direct control. You were literally just placing zones. It was going to be the simplest mod in the world in that regard. There was going to just be a lot of content behind it. And that then the NPCs would be building everything. And this is, you could see this design pattern going into Industrial Revolution, where it was, you don't get to discover the tech tree. The settlers do. You had no control. But then watching people play through the original release of Sim Settlements, it was like, oh, people want to also like have some control over the style and design. Like they want to have the ability to select the building plans and kind of play out little stories, and it kind of lets you role play a little more like that. So then you tie that in with these characters, then players can find a house among all the add-on packs that fits well with that character's personality and give that to them, give them a job that makes sense. And that's something I've been trying to embrace too, is giving players more choice for that. So like people who don't want to get involved can let the randomization go, and then people who want to do that, what you just described, is like create a backstory for these characters, they can do that.
I felt like that with the creating stuff in Fallout 4. Like it sort of felt like Bethesda added it like an afterthought. Like, oh, you can actually build things in here. And right now, I'm playing the game primarily by building things. And yeah, I have to shoot things occasionally too, but the building is the fun part. Like they made sort of like The Sims,
right,
for a Fallout universe.
Yeah. I think they didn't quite take it far enough though. But it's I think they at least gave us a good framework to work from so that we could do what we're doing now. Like the skeleton of what they did is enough to get us going. And they actually, I don't think it's completely tacked on, because I think if it was completely tacked on, they wouldn't have bothered with like food and happiness and those mechanics. Like like the fact that actually has some semblance of balance to it and they thought it through. Says to me it wasn't just tacked on. There was actually a lot of effort.
I don't think it was like an afterthought like that. But like the main focus was like the normal Fallout games. Like you go around and you level up your character and maybe you build a base for yourself, and then it escalated. But I think a lot of people play the game as a different game to just being a Fallout game. Now it's also sort of create your own house game and shoot them up.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to play it, and that's been tough too, to make decisions as far as new features of like which group is the majority. I am still not sure of like, is the majority people who are intently focused on settlement gameplay? Is it people who are just want to design and they're using our stuff as augmentation, or is it people who are trying to just automate all of that stuff so that they can explore it while they're playing a shooter? It seems like we have such a broad mix of people who want to play it in different ways.
Yeah.
A couple more questions we have here. Would you say people would rather have a custom NPC with no custom voice or a character with a subpar okay custom voice? I mean, it depends on what you consider like subpar. Is, if I hear like somebody's mom in the background, like that's a no, it's a deal breaker for me. But I would say if people have like a mediocre mic, maybe they don't have all the noise removal done, and maybe there's just like a little bit of hissing or something, I could probably stand it. But yeah, I would custom NPCs with no custom voice though almost don't feel like a custom NPC, just because there's so much variety already in the community with some of the mods that add new faces and stuff. I would say that if you can't do a voice, then the NPC is going to lack a lot of the flavor. Like that, the voice is one of the defining characteristics, I think, in making custom NPCs stand out.
I think also that there's usually a will to put in too much dialogue for custom NPCs. If you have short sentences, I think that tend to make for a more believable experience. You tend to listen more to what they say. And, sometimes with custom NPCs, you hear them, they rant on for too long. And if the player has the ability to respond, then you feel involved in that discussion, and then you have a better dialogue. So I think many custom quests, they go wrong in the regard that they let the NPC talk for way too long before the player can respond to what they're saying.
I definitely do that with the characters I've written. It's like mostly because it's like leaning on it as a crutch, because we can't write custom lines for the player. So it's like, all right, I guess my NPC have to do all the exposition.
Exactly, they have to tell everything, but I think it's easy to lose the player.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution. I mean, well, the solution to that is something that I have like been poking at mildly, but I haven't made any significant progress to. Is we need to. This is like a great time to take advantage of the deep fakes. Of like, let's deep fake the player voices so we can make our own lines. That's what I want to see happen.
That would be good.
Let's see, somebody else's question. Is there a city plan contest mod in the works so it doesn't flag the FH DLC items in PvP and flash them purple? Oh yeah, I forgot to update that. I will do that tonight. I apologize, people who are working on the city plan. I will fix that tonight. I usually update that on the day we announced the next contest, and I was sick that day. As any of you saw, Donald Strong had to step in and record that video for me, so I just totally forgot about it. Let's see. For the record, though, would it be possible to set the frequency of certain lines? My radhounds have essentially become the owl scout. I don't know what that means. Set the frequency for certain lines. You can definitely mess with the frequency because that's what Sidante did for the player voice changer, but I have no idea how he did that. I think there's a script or something that allows you to change the frequency of voice files. Let's see. One of the biggest things that would come from some mod or adding a replacement voice is the ability to help other mods with dialogue. That's true. Yeah, that would be one of my reasons for wanting to re-record the player dialogue. Is then we could just then make the new voices a requirement and then be like, all right, now we can record whatever lines we want. That's definitely a potential upside. But man, I don't know how realistic it is. I bet at some time before people move on from Fallout 4, somebody is going to take up that task of like, you know what, I've got a nice voice that's substantially different than the vanilla. I'm going to record all these lines and put myself in there. Somebody will do it eventually, I think. Okay. Well, I think questions have dried up. I think we got a good 2 hours in here. I'm feeling like we made some good progress. It was fun talking with you too.
Yes,
anything
it was
else you
really
want to
fun
bring
talking.
up, and then I'll let you both go. I know it's pretty late for you guys.
Yeah, but it was so nice to of you to take the time to do this. It was very helpful in getting the last parts done.
Awesome. All right, everybody spam these two with messages about their children pack. We want to see it soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll probably do this again in a couple of weeks. My plan is probably to do it on patch days, like in the evening. But for some people, that's just not gonna work out in time. Like Tinuvia and Myrm, that would have been like 4 a.m. for you, so that would not have worked out. But so like every 2 or 3 weeks, I'll probably do one of these. I'll have somebody on. Any of you watching, if you're interested in doing this, just shoot me a message on SimSettlements.com or Facebook or nexusmods.com if you want to be a part of this and you want to be a guest and have me help you with some mods or whatever, or some add-on packs. Happy to talk to you about that. Obviously, you got to come in with at least some baseline experience, at least have done most of the type of stuff I've done in Bethesda Mod School or gone through some toolkits, because it will not be useful to reteach you stuff that you could have learned from that way. So I need people who are kind of self-starters, but anybody who's interested in doing this. Otherwise, I have a few people lined up already. But thank you again, Tinuvia and Myrmarachne. We look forward to playing with your Children of Adam pack.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.